Number 10. Shana Buono. In January 2018, tragedy struck a woman named Shana Buono in the most horrific way possible. Her boyfriend Clark was a pilot. He and his two friends were in the cockpit of a plane while he was showing them the instruments and giving them a little bit of a tour. While that was happening, Shana was waiting for them on the tarmac below. But the aircraft was on, the engines were running, the propellers spinning, and Shana was standing way too close. That's when she got the worst idea of her life. Shana approached the plane to take a picture of herself but wound up touching the spinning propeller. She was just trying to take a selfie, but she said it was dark. Shana couldn't see exactly where she was. She had her phone out, was excited for the picture, and suddenly was being ripped to shreds. She was struck by the propeller, which tore one of her arms completely off her body and ripped half of the other off entirely. It happened instantly, leaving no time for her to react, and because of the way the propeller hit her, there wasn't anything doctors could do to fix her up. She survived, which was a miracle in itself, but she lost the use of both her arms. Now she uses homemade prosthetics to feed herself and do makeup. Despite everything, Shana hasn't slowed down at all. She's still independent, and the last we heard, she was training for a triathlon. Number 9. Madison Bradley. Madison Bradley was going through what could have been one of the best days of her life when suddenly it was over. According to the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Madison was killed during a tragic boating accident on Monday, July 4th, 2022. She was there for the 4th of July on the Blind River in Livingston Parish when she accidentally fell overboard and hit the propeller. Madison was only 17 years old and had her whole life in front of her. Mike Bradley, Madison's father, said that the world lost someone special that day. But it wasn't completely Madison's fault. She was only a passenger on a pontoon boat with 5 other people aboard it. It was about 5:30 p.m. and the boat party was just getting started. But the driver, 33-year-old David Crow, was wasted. Driving a boat under the influence is just as illegal as drunk driving in a car. David's impairment caused him to jostle the boat, which knocked Madison and another passenger into the water. Madison hit the propeller, which ended her life. The other person who was knocked off safely resurfaced. After the horrifying accident, David was charged with vehicular homicide. He could be spending a significant amount of his life, upwards of 30 years, in a Louisiana jail if found guilty. Number 8. Natalia and her flip-flops. Natalia Andrea Laranaga Fajardo was on vacation in Colombia in November of 2022 when a pair of flip-flops killed her. The 26-year-old California woman was shredded by the propeller of a boat after she dropped her flip-flops in the Caribbean Sea and jumped in to get them. Officials claim Natalia suffered intense bleeding from injuries to her legs, buttocks, and lower back. She jumped in the exact wrong place, so the propellers ripped her apart from the waist down. There's even footage of the gruesome incident, which shows nearby boaters screaming in shock as the deep blue sea quickly turned crimson with blood. To make things even more tragic, Natalia didn't die right away. She was whisked to the hospital and given multiple blood transfusions. She spent that time fighting for her life, but died from cardiac arrest before the doctors could save her. There was nobody to blame for what happened. It was just a stroke of bad luck. It wasn't the boat driver's fault or Natalia's. There were 23 other tourists on board and 2 crew members. There was no way Natalia could have known she was jumping to her death. Number 7. Sani Aliu. Sani Aliu was a college student in Georgia who experienced a fatal accident after a date in 2022 went horribly wrong. The 21-year-old student had taken a girl out on their first date. Being a hopeless romantic, Sani planned something amazing. He took his crush out to dinner in an airplane. The dinner went well. Everything was going great. And then they took the airplane back and landed at Georgia's Statesboro-Bullock County Airport. It was dark, a little after 10:35 p.m. After the plane got to the ramp, Sani's date got out and walked to the back of the plane to wait. Next, Sani got out of the small single-engine Cessna 172 and walked straight into the propeller. Instead of walking away, he walked toward the front of the airplane and the propeller hit him in the head. He was pronounced dead at the scene when paramedics got there. His cause of death was cerebral lacerations. What this means is that the propeller broke through the bone to Sani's brain, killing him pretty much instantly, and right in front of his date, too. At least Sani didn't feel any pain. It was a horrible accident, but at least the college student didn't suffer. Number 6. Jack Fenton. A 22-year-old student was killed by a helicopter while on a summer trip in Greece during 2022. The British national named Jack Fenton died near Athens after what must have been a breathtaking helicopter ride. Jack chartered a flight from the island of Mykonos to Sparta, ancient homeland of the Spartan warriors. According to what senior police officials told The Times, Jack was the first to leave the Bell 407 helicopter. But as he moved to the back, he was hit in the head by the small rear rotor. The rotor blade hit him hard enough that he probably never even realized it. Jack was traveling with some family members. The Oxford Brookes student was with his parents, sister, and a handful of other British tourists. It's hard to imagine the despair his parents must have felt when the helicopter's pilot radioed the other helicopter, the one Jack's parents were on, to tell them the news. The second pilot then diverted from his original course and landed at the Athens International Airport. This was to prevent the man's parents from seeing where Jack was laying dead. Greek media reported that the pilot would be investigated to see if he had any hand in Jack's death. If he let the passenger off the helicopter before the blade stopped spinning, he could be in big trouble for negligence. Greece doesn't mess around when it comes to punishing bad captains, meaning the pilot could see some serious consequences. Number 5. The deadly Antonov AN-24. In the summer of 2022, a Russian airport worker lost their life to a propeller when they walked straight into the blades. The unfortunate incident unfolded in Russia's Khanty-Mansi Autonomous Okrug region. The ground service agent was working near an Antonov AN-24 aircraft belonging to UTair at the Beloyarsk airport. UTair is one of the top carriers in the country, and the plane was getting ready for a flight to Brezovo. While the aircraft technician was clearing the thrust pads, they accidentally made contact with the blades of a rotating propeller. The individual was only identified as a 48-year-old male. Russian media outlets weren't able to release his name. Shortly afterwards, the video of the incident popped up online. It's absolutely disturbing and I would never recommend anyone watch it. But based on the footage, it looks like the technician didn't see where he was going. He walked straight into the moving propeller as if he didn't see it directly in front of him. Number 4. Hunter Prevost. On a Saturday night in July, Hunter Prevost was boating on Lake Pontchartrain in Louisiana. According to authorities, the driver was under the influence of alcohol and may also have taken some drugs, though it was never officially confirmed. Hunter was only 21 years old, a local from Loranger. The individual driving the boat was a friend of his named Lane Keenan. The pair didn't seem to be fishing, just drinking and joyriding. The night took an ugly turn when Hunter fell off the 25-foot boat and hit the back propeller. He died in the process. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries said his body wasn't pulled out of the lake until around 7 p.m. After he was hit, his body sank and his watery corpse had to be fished out. This was yet another tragic incident of messing around on a boat. Unfortunately for Lane Keenan, he was arrested for driving a vessel while impaired, reckless operation of a vessel, and vehicular homicide. He could now go to jail for accidentally murdering his friend just because he got drunk and thoughtlessly drove a boat around. Number 3. Ground crew gone wrong. A ground crew member at an airport in Alabama died at the start of 2023 when they were sucked into the engine of a plane. The National Transportation Safety Board made a statement saying that the ground crew member was ingested. The employee, who wasn't initially named, was working at Montgomery Regional Airport when the accident happened on a Saturday at around 3 p.m. Getting hit by a propeller is one thing, but being sucked into the actual engine is somehow 10 times more terrifying. From what little we know about the recent incident, it was simply a freak accident. The aircraft was at the gate, its parking brake was engaged, and most safety measures were apparently being followed. According to what federal investigators revealed during the subsequent investigation, the worker had been warned multiple times to stay away from the airplane. The entire crew had done a safety huddle right before, being specifically instructed on how to avoid being sucked into an engine. But it was New Year's Eve. The workers were undoubtedly excited to be finished with their shift, and the victim made a simple but deadly mistake. Even though they were told 10 minutes earlier how to behave near the plane, the crew member still died. Why were the engines still on, and why were there people walking around the plane? It's because the airplane had to be left running for a cool down of 2 minutes. The auxiliary power unit wasn't working, so the engines had to stay on briefly. Still, the worker got too close, was sucked inside the engine, and never made it out alive. And although the victim was never officially identified by any reports, news outlets have recently said that it was a woman named Courtney Edwards. Number 2. Felicia Denham. In August 2022, a woman in Nelson County, Kentucky, walked into an airplane propeller and was killed. 37-year-old Felicia Denham was on a small plane traveling from Elizabethtown to Bardstown. Her brother-in-law was the pilot, and Felicia was joined by her young daughter. When the plane landed, Felicia thought it would be nice to give her daughter a better view of how to pilot an aircraft. Her idea was to walk to the front of the plane and lift her daughter up so she could see through the window of the cockpit. But unbeknownst to Felicia, the propeller was still spinning. Felicia walked right into the spinning propeller and died instantly. Not a single thought went through her head. 1 second she was walking forward confidently, then a fragment of an instant later, she was gone. In case you're wondering, Felicia's daughter survived without any physical injuries. But considering how she watched her mother die at the hands of a plane propeller right in front of her, chances are she will carry that trauma for the rest of her life. But perhaps the most shocking thing of all this is that according to the National Transportation Safety Board, this kind of thing happens all the time. They record about 3 propeller deaths each year when somebody walks into the spinning propeller of a small plane. Number 1. Shana Smith. A boating accident went down at Lake Pleasant, Arizona in May 2022. A woman died after she had her leg cut clean off by a boat propeller. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office identified the victim as 32-year-old Shana Smith. She jumped into the water and was immediately hit by the propeller. Firefighters first believed the incident happened during water skiing, but that wasn't actually the case. The victim simply jumped into the water on the wrong side of the boat, her foot landed near the spinning propeller, and that was it. The metal blade caught her leg, ripped most of it off, and then she started bleeding out into the murky water. Smith didn't die right away, though. She was quickly flown to a nearby hospital where she died not long after. In this case, there was no evidence of anybody being impaired or any foul play. It goes to show that even without alcohol involved, boating can be extraordinarily dangerous. Without following proper safety procedures, a simple swim at the lake can turn into a nightmare, which is exactly what happened to Shana Smith.
Ferry brawl. Complete chaos broke out one evening in 2022 on a ferry that was carrying passengers from Block Island to Narragansett, Rhode Island. It was a holiday weekend in the state, where residents marked the anniversary of the end of World War II with Victory Day. The ferry service was so busy because of this holiday that an unscheduled ferry was added to the itinerary in order to accommodate the crowds. Unlike other boats that day, there was no state troopers stationed on the last-minute ferry. A large fight broke out among the passengers while it was out on the water. Things apparently got so out of control that police caught up to the ferry with a Coast Guard boat and jumped on board to arrest the parties involved. 4 law enforcement agencies ultimately responded to the scene to get the altercation under control, and 2 people were hospitalized with injuries. It was unclear what started the massive fight, but it's likely safe to assume that overcrowding was a factor. After all, it takes very little for a disagreement to escalate into blows in a stressful environment. But the 7 suspects who were arrested in connection with the fight were uncooperative, according to the police, giving them little to go on when it came to getting to the bottom of the situation. 5 men were charged with disorderly conduct, while a 20-year-old woman was hit with a weapons-related charge for allegedly carrying a knife. Another woman faced 1 count of obstructing an officer in the execution of duty. Defendant Cassandra Laurie maintained her innocence, telling local station WPRI that she was on an upper level of the ferry when the fight broke out. She rushed to the lower level because she wanted to get off the boat as soon as possible. Laurie claimed that she and a man next to her were innocent bystanders, and that she thinks police arrested her because she couldn't answer their questions. She's accused of accepting a shank from another passenger and then throwing it into the water. Other defendants have their own versions of what happened, but at the moment, the cases appear to be ongoing. 9. Valerie Gonzalez. 32-year-old Valerie Gonzalez had been drinking all day when she boarded a Las Vegas-bound JetBlue flight at Florida's Fort Lauderdale-Hollywood Airport in 2019. When she realized she was seated near a 3-year-old, she allegedly threw an unhinged tantrum. As the woman droned on with her expletive-filled tirade, fellow passengers began pulling out their phones to record the woman's inappropriate outburst. At one point in the footage, the little girl's mother can be heard asking if someone just spat on her daughter. Gonzalez replied yes, at which point she appeared to notice that she was being filmed. She then got up and left the plane while screaming angrily at the people around her, dropping F-bombs and telling them to enjoy their time in Vegas. Gonzalez allegedly tried re-entering the plane, telling airline staff that she refused to sit near a 3-year-old. She was accused of hitting airline employees, spitting on a passenger, and continuing to verbally abuse everyone around her as she got back onto the aircraft. However, she wouldn't be continuing on to Vegas as she expected. When officers boarded to arrest her, she refused to walk or follow their commands. So they put Gonzalez in a wheelchair with leg restraints and put a spit mask on her while taking her into custody. She ended up being charged with battery as a result of her inappropriate actions. 8. Bill Kutch. During the morning rush hour one day in 2009, Long Island Railroad passengers noticed that something was off about how the train was being driven. One customer later said that it seemed like a little kid was driving, especially with the way the operator was laying on the horn. The witness kept an eye on the enclosed driver's cab and waited for the door to open. When it did, they saw the driver, 40-year-old Ronald Cabrera, standing away from the controls, meaning someone else was operating the train. That someone was later identified as Bill Kutch, a regular passenger who was on friendly terms with the employees. He allegedly bragged about driving the train after returning to his seat, but nobody seemed impressed, including law enforcement. Kutch and Cabrera were indicated for felony reckless endangerment, and Cabrera faced an additional charge for official misconduct. In court, Cabrera claimed that he let Kutch, a court stenographer, into the cab because he wanted free legal advice about his recent divorce. He pleaded guilty to 1 misdemeanor count of official misconduct and was sentenced to community service. He was also fired from his job but appealed the decision, and the transit board recommended that he be considered for an entry-level position, but that he should never be allowed to drive a train again. The case against Kutch was ultimately dropped due to a lack of evidence that he was actually operating the train. 7. Irene Torrey. 42-year-old Irene Torrey was on a Prosecco bender in 2018 when she rubbed up against a train conductor in Perth, Scotland. As a result, she was thrown off the train and was arrested, and eventually she was convicted in the case. 2 years later, Tori was accused of groping an Uber driver and making him touch her. It started when she began asking the driver intrusive questions about his personal life, like if he was married and if he cheated on his wife. As her bizarre behavior continued, the driver began recording the incident on his phone. Tori eventually leapt from the back of the car into the front passenger seat and offered the driver money to sleep with her. The disturbed driver pulled over and told her that she couldn't change seats when the car was in motion, but she ignored him and started touching him inappropriately. He removed Tori's hands, but she took off some of her clothing to expose herself to him. Tori then asked the driver to drop her off at her ex's house so she could persuade him to give her money and booze. When the car arrived, her ex warned the driver to be careful of Tori. He said he didn't want her at his home and instructed the driver to leave and take her with him. In court, Tori admitted to forcing the driver to touch her and making inappropriate remarks. She was subsequently sentenced to 3 years of supervision and publicly listed as an offender due to the nature of her crimes. 6. John McGee. While boarding a Philadelphia-bound flight in West Palm Beach, Florida in early 2023, 66-year-old John McGee allegedly claimed he had a bomb in his bag. A witness later described seeing the suspect on the jet bridge, repeatedly slamming his luggage on the floor while making the bomb threat and saying, "You don't know what you're in for." In response, law enforcement rushed to the scene. Flights were grounded and the terminal was evacuated and shut down, leaving many passengers sitting in planes on the tarmac while others were deplaned without explanation. Several people posted on social media about seeing unusual security activity and how they weren't being told what was going on. According to an affidavit, when a deputy asked McGee if he had said anything he should not have said while boarding, he reportedly said no, and that he didn't say anything about blowing up a plane. Officials found nothing suspicious in his bags, and the terminal was finally reopened 3 hours after the ordeal began. The flight to Philadelphia was delayed until the next day, and passengers were put up in hotels. In the meantime, McGee landed himself in accommodation at the Broward County Jail on charges of making a false report concerning planting a bomb, an explosive, or a weapon of mass destruction. 5. Charlie Meadows. When a passenger got out of his car without paying one day, Liverpool taxi driver John Gunning followed the man in his vehicle in an attempt to collect the fare he was owed. They got into a shouting match, and when the fare dodger began kicking his car, Gunning exited the vehicle and the men began to fist fight. Chaos ensued as people from nearby joined in the brawl and vandalized the taxi. At first, Gunning appeared to have subdued the non-paying passenger, later identified as 23-year-old Charlie Meadows. However, Meadows somehow gained the upper hand and then stabbed Gunning 3 times. In addition to being physically injured, Gunning's car was so damaged that it was no longer drivable. Police arrested Meadows, whose defense attorney, Peter Killen, argued in court that his client was drunk and was going through personal issues at the time of the incident. He insisted Meadows was deeply remorseful for his behavior and that he'd made a lot of progress straightening his life out while in prison, awaiting the outcome of the case. Meadows pleaded guilty to several charges stemming from the fight with Gunning and another incident, including wounding with intent, possession of a bladed weapon, and trying to take drugs into prison. In the end, he was sentenced to more than 6 years in prison. 4. Heidi McKinney. During a flight from Las Vegas to Portland, Oregon in 2016, a 19-year-old woman sitting in an otherwise empty row was joined by a drunk lady who sat down in the seat right next to hers. The sloshed stranger tried forcing the teen to drink alcohol, then repeatedly touched her inappropriately. She licked the victim's ear, straddled her, touched her chest repeatedly, and made explicit comments. When the victim pushed the woman off of her, she called the 19-year-old poor. Airline staff moved the drunk woman, later identified as Heidi McKinney, and kept her away from the victim for the rest of the flight. Upon Upon landing, McKinney was federally charged with abusive contact. She pleaded guilty to the reduced charge of assault with intent to commit a felony and was sentenced to 8 months of house arrest, along with 3 years of probation. McKinney's male fiancé reportedly told authorities that she can't metabolize alcohol and that the behavior she showed on the plane is the type of thing that happens when she drinks. By then, she already had 2 DWI convictions under her belt, and her problems with alcohol seemed to have continued after the airplane incident. After one court hearing several months before the case was concluded, she was allegedly found passed out in a bar. According to her lawyer, she went to rehab and was working to get her life on track. McKinney didn't say anything at her sentencing, but wrote an apology to the victim. The 19-year-old planned to read a statement, but was so traumatized that her grandmother had to read it for her. 3. Racist cab rider. When a passenger got into the front seat of a taxi in Birmingham, England one day in 2020, driver Abid Mustafa asked the man to sit in the back due to COVID-19 safety policies. This allegedly made the passenger irrationally angry, and he erupted into a racist tirade. Mustafa pulled over and warned the rider that his behavior wouldn't be tolerated. The passenger agreed to stop, but as soon as they were back on the road, the man launched right back into an aggressive rant. At the end of the ride, Mustafa started recording the disturbing behavior and threatened to post the video on social media. In the clip, the irate rider could be heard reminding Mustafa that they were in England and threatening to blow him out of the effing water. Mustafa calmly told the man that if he posted the video online, a lot of people would see how he was acting. The man said he didn't give a flying you-know-what and continued rambling, finally exiting the car after Mustafa politely threatened to start charging a waiting fare. He was later arrested, and Mustafa was praised for his calm and patient response to the out-of-control passenger. Racist treatment toward taxi drivers is an ongoing problem in England's West Midlands region, according to Mustafa. He said that he hoped footage of the incident would prompt local officials to have security cameras installed in taxi cabs, which he thinks would majorly reduce abuse toward drivers. 2. Bus passengers' abusive tirade. In late 2019, footage of a disturbing attack on a bus driver in Vancouver, Canada, appeared on social media and quickly went viral. Recorded by a passenger, the footage showed a man violently kicking the bus doors and allegedly spitting on the driver before exiting. The driver had repeatedly asked the man to step back behind a red line into the passenger area, but he kept crossing it. When it became clear that the suspect wasn't going to cooperate, the driver pulled over and told him to get out of the bus, at which point he flew into a tantrum. Although the driver was physically unharmed, he was reportedly shaken up by the man's behavior. The ordeal came less than a day after transit workers in the area went on strike for better working conditions and wages. The region's transit union had also called for police to take action amid a disturbing spike in attacks on drivers. 2 days after the incident, police took a man into custody on a separate case under British Columbia's Mental Health Act and recognized him as the suspect involved in the event on the bus. He was arrested, but authorities were still investigating to determine whether to press criminal charges. But it's now more than 3 years later, and there hasn't been any new information released on the case. 1. Arielle Jean Jackson. In 2021, 32-year-old Arielle Jean Jackson allegedly got into an argument with a Southwest Airlines employee right as she boarded a New York-bound flight in Dallas. The employee ordered Jackson to leave the aircraft, but as she was exiting the plane, she got into another verbal confrontation with a different staff member. According to police, she punched the worker in the head with a closed fist, sending them to the hospital with injuries. Officers boarded the plane and took Jackson into custody on suspicion of aggravated assault. Authorities declined to reveal many details on the matter, citing an ongoing investigation, so it's unclear what the initial argument was about. But considering how quickly the decision was made to kick her off the flight, it's likely safe to assume that the disagreement was heated and escalated fast.
Number 9. Samantha Peer. To rake in some badly needed extra cash, 8th grade science teacher Samantha Peer and her husband Dylan began performing together in adult videos and making them available to paying subscribers on OnlyFans. Peer went by the stage name Chloe Carter, but someone still figured out that it was her in the videos, and the school district was not happy when they found evidence of the raunchy couple creating content in the classroom during off hours. Once her superiors found out about the page, Peer resigned. Dylan, who also worked at the school, was fired 4 days later. In response to the scandal, Samantha posted a video claiming that she and Dylan became adult performers to compensate for their low-paying teaching salaries. She explained that she was already spending a lot of time on school-related duties outside of her contract hours, and that it was taking away from her time with her children and the family's ability to survive on teaching alone. Samantha said she blocked the entire state of Arizona from viewing her content in hopes that it wouldn't interfere with her day job, but the videos were somehow discovered. The disgraced educator accused her former employee of disseminating the images and details of her account to students. In addition to losing her job, Peer was also banned from OnlyFans for violating its policy on making content in public, but she at least managed to avoid criminal charges. Number 8. Guyette Duhart. If you were raised by old-school parents, you may remember them threatening to wash your mouth out with soap, or actually doing it. But this type of punishment is now widely considered abuse, and it certainly isn't something school teachers typically get away with doing. Guyette Duhart learned this lesson the hard way in 2019 when she was working as a teacher for the Palm Beach County School District in Florida. A student told a school administrator that he was talking loudly in her class when she said that he needed his mouth washed out with soap. Duhart allegedly grabbed a bottle of sanitizer from her desk and told the student to approach, then pumped the sanitizer into his mouth. Several students corroborated the young man's story, but Duhart claimed that he grabbed the bottle and pumped the sanitizer into his own mouth. He spit the sanitizer onto the floor, left the classroom, then returned a little while later, at which Duhart let him go to the bathroom and rinse his mouth out. She insisted to investigators that she had no idea anything had happened until he left the classroom. In the first disciplinary action taken against her in her 12-year career, she was suspended for 10 days without pay. Number 7. Candace Mason. Most people associate dancing poles with strip clubs, but some consider it a legitimate art form, and it's gained increasing credibility in recent years for the athleticism and skill it demands, which seems to be the approach that North Carolina teacher Candace Mason took when she began pole dancing in her living room as a mental and physical release. Mason became so passionate about her newfound hobby that she shared videos of herself pole dancing on social media under a different name. She also began teaching it part-time. But the school she worked for apparently didn't share Mason's sentiment about pole dancing being an art, and when students discovered one of her videos in 2018, she was suspended from her job. She was reportedly accused of violating the school's code of conduct for online behavior, which dictates that teachers are held to the same standards on social media as they are in public. But the policy failed to explicitly define what constitutes crossing the line. Mason's suspension raised bigger questions about what behaviors a school district has the right to police. And while she was frustrated by the stigma attached to the pole dancing, there was one good takeaway from the situation. As she pointed out to the Washington Post, "I can't change everyone's perception of pole dancing or me, but I do like that it's getting the attention it deserves." At number 6, Diane Tirado. One day in 2018, students at the Westgate School in Port St. Lucie, Florida, entered the classroom to find a message on the whiteboard from their teacher, Diane Tirado. It read, "Bye, kids. Mrs. Tirado loves you and wishes you the best in life. I have been fired for refusing to give you a 50% for not handing anything in." Tirado had been fired for refusing to adhere to the school's no-zero policy, which dictated that 50% was the lowest possible grade a student could receive. She claimed that she learned about the policy after some students failed to turn in an assignment she had given them 2 weeks to complete. Because Tirado was new at the school and was still in her probationary period, the letter informing her of her termination wasn't required to include a reason for why she was being fired. A school spokesperson denied that she was fired over the no-zero policy and claimed that she was let go for her substandard performance, lack of professionalism, and the toxic culture she allegedly created on campus. Numerous students and parents had supposedly complained about the teacher, and the school said it was investigating possible physical abuse. Tirado vehemently denied the allegations. As a teacher of 17 years, she said it wasn't the first time a principal or administrative staff member disliked her, but she had never been canned without warning or accused of creating a toxic environment. She said that she hoped for changes within the education system that would require students to earn their grades and put an end to what she described as a fraudulent policy that teaches kids that they deserve a reward just for showing up. Number 5. Gregory Salcido. In early 2018, a California school teacher's harsh anti-military diatribe was leaked on social media, sparking outrage in a community with strong ties to the armed forces. 49-year-old Gregory Salcido, who was also a local councilman, was working at a high school in Pico Rivera when he allegedly launched into a disparaging rant in response to a student's U.S. Marines t-shirt. In one recording, he could be heard saying, "Don't wear that in here." He also referred to military members as dumb and stupid, further stating, "They're not like high-level thinkers, they're not academic people, they're not intellectual people, they're the freaking lowest of the low." As you can imagine, people were extremely angry, and they wasted no time demanding Salcido's removal from the classroom. News of the incident garnered national attention and even reached the ranks of the White House, with Chief of Staff John Kelly commenting that Salcido ought to go to hell for his behavior. The school board voted to terminate Salcido following an investigation into his conduct, which found that in addition to his anti-military remarks, he'd used racial slurs in the classroom and told his students he would kill them all in order to protect his family if necessary. He appealed the decision, and the matter was about to go to court when he changed his mind and instead submitted a letter of resignation. In a statement, the teacher of 22 years said that he was simply no longer interested in being employed by the district. Number 4. Susan Oyer. Florida schoolteacher Susan Oyer was no stranger to allegations of mistreating her students when she was disciplined in 2020 for her latest spate of offensive remarks. In previous cases dating back to 2012, she was accused of calling African American students a disgrace to their race for not knowing the answer to a test question about the 1970s dance show Soul Train. One student claimed that Oyer said she looked like a hoochie missy and that her pants were too tight. Another time, a student said that her father was going to Mexico to get ingredients for his restaurant, to which Oyer allegedly responded, "Ingredients for what? A bomb?" Students also claimed that she said then-Governor Rick Scott deserved to be kicked out or assassinated. The problematic instructor settled these previous cases with the Education Commission by agreeing to a $750 fine and 3 years of probation at her job. She fell under scrutiny again in 2019 when the school district launched an investigation into parents' complaints about how their children were being treated in the classroom. Some even requested that their kids be removed from Oyer's class. According to a state affidavit, Oyer threatened to call immigration on a student, told another that she was surprised their parents hadn't thrown them against a wall, mockingly said, "Oh, look at Miss, I'm not even American talking." She also allegedly told a young man that there was a special school for students like him and criticized students' poor marks in front of their peers. In a settlement with the State Department of Education, Oyer agreed to a 6-month suspension of her teaching license. If she wanted to return to teaching afterward, she would have to pay a $1,000 fine and take a classroom management course. And while she didn't deny the allegations, the agreement did not require her to admit fault. Since then, it appears as though Oyer has chosen a new career path and is now a real estate agent. Number 3, Christy Buchan. It's become easy for attractive women to make big money from home by selling steamy content on OnlyFans. Since then, a number of school teachers have come under fire for moonlighting as nude models. In one recent case, a 33-year-old physics teacher from Scotland named Kirsty Buchan faced harsh backlash from her community when her OnlyFans photos were leaked among the student body where she worked. Furious parents complained to the school's leaders and an investigation was launched. One parent told the Daily Record, that Buchan's images weren't just suggestive, but that they were extreme and left nothing to the imagination. Buchan took her content page down after word got out about her second job, and she also resigned from her day job before disciplinary measures could be taken against her. It's unclear what she's up to these days, but she also has a history of working on camera with her clothes on via small-time acting gigs. Number 2, Tiffany Eaton. When a fight broke out between two students in her classroom in 2014, Detroit schoolteacher Tiffany Eaton tried summoning help with a school-issued walkie-talkie that she had been given to use in case of an emergency. But it wasn't working, and the fight only seemed to be escalating as the young men knocked over desks and continued going at it. Not knowing what else to do, Eaton took a broom and swatted one of the boys several times in an attempt to get the violence to stop. The student backed off, but only briefly. Cell phone footage of the altercation shows the other student rushing back toward him, and the fight continued until another student intervened and broke the parties up. After seeing the video of Eaton hitting one of the students with a broom, the district quickly took action to fire her. But the situation wasn't so cut and dry, according to Detroit Federation of Teachers President Keith Johnson, who said that Eaton violated the corporal punishment provision in the Michigan School Code, but that the same code also required her to do what was necessary to defuse a violent situation. The video went viral, and the public rallied around Eaton, who said she wanted her job back and hired a lawyer. She got her wish and was offered the opportunity to return to the classroom, but by then she had the opportunity to reflect on the situation. Through her attorney, Eaton said that she would only go back to teaching if certain assurances could be made. At the time, she and the district were negotiating these terms, which included a zero-tolerance approach to classroom violence. And at number 1, Candace Reed. Some students could be heard laughing in a video of a white teacher allegedly mocking Native Americans in a Riverside, California classroom. Others didn't think it was one bit funny and could do little else than sit there in jaw-dropping silence, record what was going on, and share it for the world to see on social media. The footage, which surfaced in 2021, showed the teacher in a headdress chanting the trigonometry term "so-ka-toa." She continued the obnoxious display by chopping her arms in the air and jumping around the classroom. Naturally, the videos that appeared online angered people who accused the teacher, later identified as Candace Reed, of imitating Indigenous stereotypes. Some demanded for her to be disciplined, while others called for her to be fired. In a statement, the Riverside Unified School District condemned the teacher's actions as unacceptable and reassured the public that her behavior does not represent the district's values. The teacher, whose name was withheld at the time, was put on administrative leave pending the results of an internal investigation. But the bizarre math lesson was apparently nothing new, according to some students and former students who said that Reed had been doing it for years. There was even a picture of her wearing the headdress in a 2012 yearbook photo. The incident drew tears from one Native American woman who offered some compelling words during a school board meeting on the matter. She wondered out loud why nobody had reported the behavior long ago and said that she felt like Native Americans were still fighting for their rights and being bullied and treated badly. According to the Riverside City College Viewpoints, the district voted to fire Reed, something that, according to some, was long overdue. She reportedly appealed the decision, and it's unclear where the case currently stands. Thanks for watching. Would you rather work for an employer who heavily polices its employees' social media activity, or for a company who considers an employee to be a poor team player if they prefer not to form close friendships with their coworkers or talk much about their personal life? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you next time.